Before you get any quotes for solar panels or battery storage, stop. There are so many cowboys in the industry giving incorrect information on broad ranges from low prices to high prices. It's a confusing minefield. Today I'm going to be going through the top 7 things that I've learned whilst being in the industry that you need to know before you even bother getting any quotes. Let's go. The first thing I need you to be aware of before you even bother inviting anyone over or booking a phone call is knowing and understand what the annual energy consumption is of your home or your business. Now, why is this important? It's important for the same reason when you go out shopping for a car, you know what mileage you're going to drive. Because if you're driving 40,000 miles a year, you don't go buying a Nissan Micra. In the same way, we want to know how many kilowatt hours you're using a year so we don't under or oversize the system. Where do you find this information? This is found on your annual energy statement. Normally, if you're on Octopus, it's in the top right-hand corner. You want this in kilowatt hours. Now, if you've only just moved into your property, then just as much information as you can possibly provide, maybe the information from a previous property, because this just gives us the idea of how much you're using. We can then look and know how many solar panels we need, the correct battery storage size, and we can then give you an idea of a system that might be slightly bigger or slightly smaller. Otherwise, you're just completely and utterly stabbing in the dark. So before you bother, get your annual energy usage at the ready. If you have an electric vehicle, make sure you separate these figures out. So you want to know what your home usage is and what your EV car charging units look like as well in kilowatt hours. Why do we need to know this? Because energy is really cheap at night, 7 pence, and you often get more for exporting the energy during the day. So knowing and understanding the difference between the two, often we won't spec a solar and battery storage system for EV charging. It can help you save hundreds of pounds because we're not factoring in usage that effectively you're just going to be using off-peak anyway. So if you've had a quote and they've not asked you, that's a real key point to note, because the MCS Microgeneration Certification Scheme, which all installers must be registered with, make sure you check that out, will just as standard quote a quote based upon 3,500 kilowatt hours a year. So effectively everybody gets scooped into the same batch. Whether you're using 1,000 or 20,000, all the quotes will come out as being an average of 3,500 a year. Now that could mean your system could be vastly underspec'd or overspec'd. It's really important you get this piece of information ready. And that leads me quite nicely onto my next point. Number 2, account for future loads. So what we now know is how much you're using right now. Well, if you're going to be installing a hot tub or a heat pump, that's going to drastically change the amount of energy consumption that you're going to use. So what we would need to do in that scenario is go, right, well, this is my present consumption plus my estimated consumption, and I as an engineer would then always leave a bit of a back door. I'd slightly undersize the system when it comes to battery storage, but go with something maybe modular that we can add to at a later date. Knowing the future loads, make sure you get that documented. So what if you're in a little bit of limbo when it comes to, I think I might need a heat pump, I'm not exactly sure? Well, ultimately, we can size certain parts of the system so that they're ready for that usage. A medium size inverter won't be too dissimilar in price from a large size inverter, maybe a couple of £100. But at the outset, if you're just constantly driving on the I want price, comparing on price, then the installer will naturally be incentivized to install the smaller version because ultimately it affects the bottom line that little bit further. But actually, if you want to future-proof the system and want to get it ready for the likes of a heat pump in the future that you may or may not be using, you could actually just part with a couple of £100 more, go for the bigger unit, and then you've created yourself a little exit door that if you get that, the inverter's ready for it, your solar panels are spec ready, and then essentially all you do is just buy another battery module, like the SigenStor that's stackable, plonk another battery on, and away you go and you're ready for the heat pump. So it is possible to design these with that future load in mind, but if you don't say anything and don't give that person that information, your system can't be ready for it and you're just going to get the lowest price, the cheapest, the most competitive, because everybody always focuses on price and it's the wrong way of thinking about it. Point number 3, Know what stage of the process you're at. And this is really important to identify for someone that's designing your system. For example, I might be designing a system for an extension I'm having built, a re-roof that I'm having done, or it might just be, I'm just thinking of having solar panels installed. Why is this important? Well, if I'm on a building job, or if I'm re-roofing, or if I'm building an extension, then in-roof solar panels might make better financial sense. Ultimately, we're not buying tiles to be able to cover the roof, and instead we do solar panels. But if I'm simply just installing them on an existing property and it's just for saving some money, then I'm going to potentially be looking at an on-roof solar solution. Now, if you are building an extension or you are undergoing a re-roof, then you might want to look at in-roof solar. Just be slightly wary of big national companies or companies that simply tell you it's not possible to do in-roof, or they might seem like they're fobbing you off a little bit. That's because sometimes they can and they do. It's often worth getting a second opinion in that respect, because if you are building an extension, having a re-roof, it can make great financial sense to go in-roof, and from an aesthetics perspective, they can look really nice whilst you're doing it and going through that process. And whilst I'm talking about a couple of conversations on extension roofs, timing matters and project management matters too. Effectively making sure that when your scaffolding goes up, and often your installer can make use of the same scaffolding, saving you some money there as well. Making sure that the trades are being keyed in together. Your large national companies will just want to get in, fit and leave. But actually, this is your home that you live in and probably going to live in for the next 30 years, for example. You want to make sure that the job's done right, so don't always take that first opinion that you're given. And on the note of building projects, I often get asked when the right time in the process is to be able to speak to the actual installer. It's a little bit of a subjective one, but I would be saying when you're at slab stage. If it's an extension, then effectively when the building work starts is what I would say. Normally takes on a standard extension, say 4 to 6 weeks to build it up to roof height. So most installers that are good, we typically have a 6 to 8 week lead time from the point of inquiry to the point of delivery. What you don't want to be doing is doing this at the 11th hour, saying, my roof's felt and battened, I'm ready for you, can you come and install tomorrow? Because, well, you need to put applications often into the national grid for permission to connect these systems to the grid. So just get a little bit earlier, if anything. Probably not too early. You don't need to get involved 2 years early, because prices will change unless you just wanted a rough budget. But I would be saying probably about 3 months before you're due to get up to roofing height, it's a great idea to engage with an installer. We, for example, will spec off drawings and plans. So if the house isn't quite built yet, the process that normally ensues is getting the drawings sent, we'll measure, design the system, and then when the roof is built, we'll physically come and measure it, mark it all out, so you know where the in-roof solar panels in that scenario could be installed and could be fitted. There is processes out there available with great companies that will enable you to be able to install that and key in nicely alongside your building project. Number 4, research the products that you're thinking of buying. So at this point in time, you might have given them the consumption, you might have all this information, but products can be a bit of a minefield. In the same way as buying a car can be a bit of a minefield too. You can have Dacia all the way up to Rolls-Royce when it comes to battery storage. And just because someone's quoted you a cheaper price probably doesn't always mean it's any better. So get familiar with the brands, do your research. We, for example, have a YouTube channel. A little bit like testing a car and taking it out for a test drive, we kind of can't test drive solar and battery storage. So it's great to be able to physically see the products, see what it looks like aesthetically, see how it performs, the unique pros and cons of those products as well, getting a very rounded view of the products that you're thinking of installing. So once you've kind of shortlisted it, you might be thinking, well, this one's 10,000 and this one's 12,000. What am I getting for the extra 2 grand in my quote? Start the researching process, do your due diligence. It's a huge amount of money often to part with, so it's really important that you do that research up front. And that's a really good acid test for being able to also work out if the installer truly knows what they're going on about. Now, if you started that due diligence process, you're going to get used to the lingo that's going to be talked about: kilowatts, kilowatt hours, inverter size, battery storage types, solar panel sizes as well. So by just taking a bit of time out of your day, a couple of hours to research a few things, when you start truly quizzing your installer, you're going to get an idea for their actual experience in this industry. And that's going to give you a good measure of what products to buy, Is my installer truly qualified in that product? Do they know about it? And how good are they going to be at supporting me once the system's fully installed? The other thing I would say is know your budget. And I want to be pretty honest here. Unless I know your budget, I can't make a good recommendation to you, or I can't be a bit like, well, actually, I could go to this product, or I could tweak and tailor it in this way. Actually, this scenario would be better that way. Think of it a bit like buying a car. You're walking into a showroom going, I want to buy a car. And I'm going, how much do you want to spend? I'm not going to tell you that information. You have to guess. I'm going to go, right, well, how many miles have you done a year? We found out the number of kilowatt hours. I think we should go for this one here. You could end up so off the beaten track. I think a lot of people think they'll just charge me whatever that looks like. Well, of course, that's your budget. But your job is then to say, how do I get the most value for my budget? I know what products I want. I know how many panels I want. Well, who's now prepared on that basis? Who's a really good installer? Am I worth paying a little bit more actually because they're just a bloody good installer? Or is it the case that actually there's some added value here? That one's doing free bird guard. Let's negotiate that in for my budget. If we don't know your budget, we've got no idea truthfully what to actually spec for you. So just walk in and say, look, I'm thinking of spending in between 10 and 12 grand. Show me my options. And at that point in time, if they're truly ripping you off, they're not going to have a very good reputation for very long, in my opinion. And also, you'll be able to wheedle out the wheat from the chaff in that respect as well, because you're going to go, they're just taking the absolute out of me. Or you might be saying, that's pretty fair actually for what I seem to be getting there. And don't be scared of saying, if I spend a bit more, what does that look like? If I spend a bit less, what does that look like? Just ask for a couple of quotes and prices either side as well. Sometimes for a couple of £100 more, you can get the bigger size. That leads me quite nicely onto number 5, which is house backup. Not all inverters are built the same way. Some inverters do not offer house backup. It is assumed by customers that in the event that their power goes out, that all solar and battery storage systems will just carry on working and will power their home. That's an incorrect statement. Some battery storages come with it as an optional extra. Take the SigenStor, for example, has an optional gateway. The gateway is what gives you whole house backup. The Powerwall 3 by Tesla Energy has a gateway. It's available with or without. If you don't spec it with a gateway, in the event of a power cut, your house will simply just turn off as normal. If you have a gateway, your home will continue to work seamlessly, depending on the final system and setup that you go for, of course. So if you get regular power cuts at your home, then you might want to be asking about whole house backup. Often whole house backup, depending on whether you're single phase or 3-phase, will be about £1,000 on single phase and maybe as much as a couple of £1,000 on 3-phase. Very subjective, I know, but that won't factor into return on investment. That's simply just an essential for those people that need whole house backup. Equally, if you don't need house backup, you've given your installer a budget, you might be able to squeeze more solar panels. They might be adding a gateway on just because that's how they normally install it. And actually, you might be going, well, I don't need that. Ask about it. Know whether you want this as an option within your quote. In at number 6 is know your why. Know why on earth you're getting into this in the first place. One of the main leading reasons is saving. So saving on bills, for example, getting the cost lower and battening down the hatches. For things like just general running costs, savings, making the most of a retirement pot is a really common approach. However, some people go, you know what, I really just want to do this for an environmental cause. I want to reduce my carbon footprint. I'm sick and tired of seeing global warming and I really want to do my bit. Other people will approach this very differently, saying, I've got medical equipment. I've just actually done a video today with a client who's had a 3-day blackout before now in their home, and that's regular for them. In that scenario, you might not be so bothered about the savings. They're nice to have, but the essential there, if I've got life-saving medical equipment, is actually just in the event the power goes out, my house continues to work and operate. So know the reason why you're engaging with an installer in the first place and identify that with them. Tell them why. Some people go, I want to future-proof it. In the future, I'm going to be installing a heat pump. If that's the case, the installer will probably look at a bigger inverter, slightly more solar panels, and overspec it. Not everything is judged on a spreadsheet, and that's really important to know. It's your main core reasons for buying in the first place that is really important. And each one of those goals has a very different outcome. For example, if I'm wanting to be as grid independent as possible, I would probably go for more solar panels because it's going to help me further into the spring and autumn months. Whereas if I was doing whole house backup, I would want more battery storage because effectively in the event the grid goes out, if it happens regularly, you want to be able to stay off grid for much longer. So as you can see, every single time we change our why we're doing this, the outcome of the design completely changes. A package deal from Facebook is very unlikely to meet any of these metrics whatsoever. And actually it's the same £10,000 you're thinking of spending, just spent very differently and more appropriately based upon your actual needs, wants and requirements. Some people that want house backup couldn't quite care less about saving the 3,000 kilowatt hours a year that they use. Instead, they just want it when they're watching the TV at night or when they want the medical equipment backing up, they just want that backing up, and that's why they want to spend that money. It could well be a security reason, knowing that you want your electric gates or you want your CCTV to stay on in the event of a grid outage. So knowing and understanding the reasons why you are buying in the first place is really important. And that leads me on to point number 7. How do you know if they're the right installer for you? This is things like checking their MCS accreditation. You need to be both accredited for solar panels and battery storage. Making sure that they're registered with the manufacturer of the product that you're thinking of having installed, so like a Powerwall 3, making sure that they're actually registered with Tesla to physically install that in the first place. Having a look at their online reviews is also really important as well. Get someone that's well recommended, that lots of people speak highly of. Don't just pick the cheapest installer that's out there. And you might say, well, that's rich coming from him. Of course he would say that. Of course he would say, don't pick the cheapest. Cheapest isn't always best. Often, if you're picking a cheap price, the installer has to make a cut somewhere. If you're comparing the same products, the same battery storage, but actually someone significantly cheaper, they've got to be cutting the cost somewhere. That cost could be cut in actually registering the system properly, actually employing qualified engineers in order to be able to get the work done, actually providing good quality aftercare. And these are the things that you want to test, and this is all the more reason to look and do your due diligence properly, because you go with the cheapest and there are so many solar companies going bust left, right and centre because they're not profitable, because they're not making a profit and they're just churning money out a bit like a Ponzi scheme. And we see so many of them come and go, and we have done over the years, that actually you want to make a decision that's good for you for the long term. So sometimes that installer might be £500 more, for example, but they've been trading for 10 years. They're a profitable business. They're doing things properly. They're employing the right team for you. And when you call them in 5 years' time, because your aerial's fallen down and broken your panel, they're in a position to actually be able to help and service your system. And when you're in that quoting process, look for engineers, people that actually know what they're going on about, not just salespeople, not just someone who's, let me call my manager and knock you £1,000 off at the end of it. Just don't buy into that type of stuff. You want to speak to someone that's truly had their hands on this equipment and really get them over to your home and get them to have a really good look through things. Like what we tend to do is do an intro call, do like a first pass design, so you've got a really rough idea of what things cost. And then on every single occasion, we would always go out to someone's home, measure it up properly, take proper photos, look up in the attic, discuss the inverter location with you and any battery storage location. So when it comes to installation day, things run really seamlessly. Now, just providing a remote quote simply isn't good enough in my opinion. How do you know where all this is going to go? Well, they know because it's winged right at the last minute. They're going to have to make those decisions on the day, and often, well, that doesn't matter to them because they're on to the next job, but you're going to have to put up with this for the next 20, 30 years if the cable's lashed diagonally across your walls. So just do me a favour. Check that you're speaking with someone who knows what they're going on about when you're actually doing the quote. Put them to the test, do your research, ask them those all-important questions. You need to know your stuff before you engage in people so that you get the right system for you. When you get a little bit further on in the process and you're wheedling them down to the last two, don't be scared of asking for references. At the end of the day, you're thinking of spending thousands of pounds, a retirement pension pot. Why wouldn't you do those extra checks just to double check in that scenario? You then want to make sure they're registered with either the RECC or the HIES, which essentially are a standards agency that makes sure solar's sold to the highest possible standards. They're not being strong-armed or forced against your will into making this purchase. Make sure that your installer is giving you an insurance-backed deposit protection and is also giving you an insurance-backed workmanship warranty. So if you part in with any money, that's insured or is covered by Section 75 of your credit card. And at the same stage game afterwards, if that company goes bust, you've done all your due diligence, you've done it right, but something happened afterwards, that the workmanship is insurance-backed, so you're not left on your own. Now, if you want to find out a little bit more about those relevant due diligence checks, we've done a brilliant checklist, which will be available in the comments below that you can take and print off. You don't need to give your email or anything along those lines. This isn't a sales tactic. This is just genuinely out there to make sure that you don't get bitten out. So we'll do a free download so you can download that, compare the different installers so you know what good looks like. Thank you.